Awesome. Thanks, everyone. It's great to be here. This will be probably the most interesting place I speak at for my entire life, so very cool to be speaking in a motorcycle shop. So I'm the co-founder of Story Protocol, and today I wanted to share a little bit about our vision, the sorts of problems we're interested in tackling, and then also go through some live demos that showcase how we use token-bound accounts in the protocol design. So the first problem that we kind of want to start with, and the problem that really animates a lot of why Story Protocol exists, is this fundamental question of, we should be living in an on-chain renaissance, a digital golden era for creators, but we aren't. First of all, social media has basically given everyone global distribution from their living room. From your couch, you can send off a video or a tweet and have millions and millions of people view it. And we're seeing remixing supercharged on TikTok, on YouTube, duets, you name it, there's retweets. Every sort of possible branching and remixing that can be built has been built. And at the same time, generative AI is turning all of that into high production quality content. So it's not just your fan fiction on Reddit, it's actually high quality Hollywood studio grade videos that can be generated. And this is an example from OpenAI's newest video model, Sora. You could tell this is basically as good as you're gonna get. So you combine those two factors, and basically people have the ability to share high quality grade content with anyone around the world and have people remix on top of it. This is an exponentially growing abundance of high quality content. And as you can see, this technology is extremely unprecedented. AI generated the amount of images that photography took 150 years to generate in just 1.5 years. And probably if you compare it with art or written text, it's probably 1,500 years just to do what AI has done in a year and a half. But despite everyone having this global distribution and godlike tools to make their art or their videos or their text extremely high quality, there is no golden age of creativity. If you paid attention to Hollywood, the past year has seen over 6 months of strikes from both the actors and the writers' guilds. So you can tell that the economics of creativity are under strain. And even online digital native creators are having a hard time monetizing, despite the many different solutions that have been offered. So our belief at Story Protocol is that the gating problem of why there is not an on-chain renaissance today is because it's not speed or performance, because those will continue to improve, but rather the underlying IP attribution and monetization layer that allows these creators to actually take advantage of the technology. So what we're seeing today is that people are doing really interesting things with AI. There's no shortage of creativity. As I said, there's an abundance. People have used AI to create a Drake and The Weeknd remix that neither involved Drake nor The Weeknd from their living room. That shot up to #1 on the SoundCloud charts in a day. And then in the video format, you're seeing these really cool remixes on YouTube with Harry Potter in the style of Balenciaga. These have garnered tens of millions of views in weeks, but this is still a lose-lose situation. Because despite this creativity, neither the remixer, nor Harry Potter, nor Drake, nor The Weeknd benefited at all from this. So the person that spent all this time creating these cool remixes, or that cool SoundCloud song, and also the underlying original creators, none of them are actually benefiting from this content. So we're in this lose-lose situation. And not only is there an economic loss on both sides, AI remixing is still illegal. These are copyright infringements. At the same time, it's inevitable. This is basically a new Napster moment where there's no way to stop this technology, right? The cease and desist model is not going to work. At the same time, how are we going to prevent people from making remixes like this? It's not going to happen. So we have to find a way to work with the internet and work with AI and compensate creators in this new open ecosystem. So we're seeing right now clear evidence that whatever the existing regime is doing, it's not working. There is a lot of tension on the edges, and you're seeing OpenAI being sued by the New York Times for regurgitating content word for word. You're seeing Getty Images going after OpenAI because it's recreating the watermarks. And so you have this entirely new set of problems that is entirely unsolved. So like I said before, this is basically a new Napster moment, and with every new technology, we need a new IP infrastructure. And without it, we're going to run into this tragedy of the commons situation. And this is a classic problem economics where you have a commons, which is the internet, that anyone can use. And so people are incentivized to use more and more of it until the commons dies out. So a clear example of this is the Google versus Perplexity AI comparison, where in the Google model, before AI, you would have people being pointed to web pages, right? So if I searched up the New York Times or the Daily News or some sports article, I would be pointed to that web page, and that web page would be able to monetize based off of this traffic. So this is supporting the commons. But now, if I just search up some sports score, if I want a summary of a complex scientific concept, the Perplexity AI or ChatGPT can do it for me without pointing to any of those original links. So if you're a website creator or website owner, you now have no traffic and no way to monetize off of your work. And this may work for the short term. You might see models getting better and better and better as it scrapes more and more data and has more and more compute. But what happens when these websites start to die out one by one? Because the commons is being eaten up by these walled gardens. And right now, there's no way to incentivize people to continue creating interesting creative content, interesting informative content that supports these commons. So we think, as I said before, the internet really needs an internet native IP infrastructure. It needs a brand new way of thinking about copyright and intellectual property. And to give some historical context for how this has happened in the past, every breakthrough, every new media technology has always required a new way to incentivize the creators. The very first instance of this was the Gutenberg printing press, which was invented and allowed people to instantly replicate books and eventually art. And at the time, this was a big problem because people were basically making copies of the Bible for free. And before, you had monks had to copy it hand by hand, so there was never really this problem of losing value for your IP. But with the printing press, this new media technology, this became a huge problem. And that was when the first copyright laws actually got created, was in the decades after the Gutenberg printing press. Creators realized we need a way to protect our work, and we need actual incentives for doing what we're doing, because otherwise this technology is going to, again, lead us to a tragedy of the commons. And right after these copyright laws were enacted, you saw an actual renaissance, the first renaissance in literature, in art, in culture, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So where are we now? The IP regime, as I mentioned, is really unsuited for the internet. We're still stuck in the Gutenberg press era of copyright laws, and that's actually in the word copyright. We still think of copyright in terms of replication, but now we have generation with AI. So it's not copy and paste. What OpenAI is doing, creating these videos, is fundamentally different, and it's actually creative generation. So we need a completely new way of thinking about these things. So this is where Story Protocol comes in, and we believe that with this new innovation of social media, remixing, and generative AI, we need a programmable IP layer. And that's something that allows us to harness the technology of the blockchain, which is, I think, fundamentally suited for AI. I think these two things need each other because on a philosophical level, AI is infinite abundance, infinite generation, infinite replication, and blockchain and block space is fundamentally about provable scarcity. So this is what NFTs do, right? This is what NFTs introduce, the idea of introducing scarcity into this abundance so that we can register digital art and culture on-chain. But the programmable IP layer takes us further. We want to not just move media on-chain, but also allow creators to set autonomous rules for engagement for their digital properties, and essentially allow people to have this remixing, licensing, and monetization API tagged onto every single IP. So what does this actually mean? I think the best way to describe this is by looking at DeFi, because we're all familiar with how DeFi transformed static money into programmable money. So compare the dollar bill that you may have in your wallet that you can only use if you go into a physical store or a restaurant or a gas station with a USDC token, which nominally has the exact same value. You can technically buy the exact same number of things with it, but can now plug into this complex ecosystem of DeFi protocols that are permissionlessly built on top of it. Essentially what DeFi did was to create a new parallel financial ecosystem that was limited only by the imagination and the powers of software. And we want to do a very similar thing for IP. We think that IP is still trapped in these off-chain environments. And if you think about your favorite characters like Mickey Mouse or Thanos or, I don't know, just name any character, it's protected by mountains and mountains of paperwork. It's just this pen and paper world. And if you want to transact that IP, if you want to make it liquid, you have to go take your team of lawyers, talk to someone else's team of lawyers, and negotiate a one-to-one bespoke negotiation. And that's extremely inaccessible, extremely opaque, extremely expensive, and high friction. So the reality is 99% of interesting IP interactions just don't happen because you have to be a big studio or you have to be a hotshot creator in order to license or even know who owns IP. So you might start to ask, well, don't NFTs start to solve this? I think that they're a really good start because they validate digital ownership and they bring media on chain, and that's really important. But at the end of the day, most NFTs are still pointers to static media files. So while they bring media on chain, IP isn't just media. IP is much more than that. It's the underlying media plus a set of rights that determine how that media should be used and how it can engage with the rest of the world, as well as the economic conditions for that engagement. So if you think about a concrete example, if I own an Azuki and you own a Pudgy, and I want to create a comic with both of our characters in it, I still have to read the complex licensing terms associated with my NFT, and I have to go and read the complex legal agreement associated with your Pudgy and figure out what's the interface. In order to do that, I have to have my legal team or my lawyers talk to your lawyers, because we're probably both not experts in how IP law works. And so you can see that although NFTs have sort of made IP tradable, all you can do is trade. That's all you can do. You can't really compose. And so the promise of composability that really runs through the entire ecosystem of blockchain has been realized in DeFi, but it hasn't been realized yet in IP. And I think in order to do so, IP needs to become programmable. So what we're doing is moving from this model of static JPEGs into programmable IPs. Programmable IPs are fundamentally multiplayer. They come in with not just on-chain rights, but the ability to set your terms for royalties, set who and when people can remix, as well as the ability to generate real legally binding licenses off of that IP. And all of this can be done permissionlessly because, again, it's an API attached to every single IP. So the way that we've really structured this from a technical perspective is by breaking IPs down into nouns and verbs, where nouns represent the core state of the IP, what makes that IP essentially itself, and then the verbs represent the functionality that you can attach as an API that other programs, whether it's AI or OpenSea or even another creator, can easily read and digest. So the way we do that, and this is where 6551 and token-bound accounts come in, is that we allow any NFT that already exists or any brand new NFT that can be created in the future to become a registered programmable IP on Story Protocol by giving it a Story Protocol implementation of a 6551 token-bound account. So think about the token-bound account as a portal from a static JPEG into a programmable IP that allows people to access all of the functions that Story Protocol offers. And so you can see this is the sort of nouns where we have this, what we call an IP asset, is what an NFT registered on Story Protocol. And it has core metadata as well as data related to different modules stored within the noun. And the verbs are the modules that are stateless that build on top of this state and allow it to access a world of functionality, whether that's permissionless licensing, royalty sharing, or adding new metadata as that IP evolves over time. So the real crux of all of this, by the way, is not just that it's existing on-chain. We actually don't want to usurp or completely replace the existing legal system, because at the end of the day, if you're a creator, you want to make sure that you can use your IP off-chain and on-chain. So what we've done is invest a lot of time and resources into working with lawyers to create what we call the Programmable IP License. And that's a real legally binding text that has these parameters like who can create derivatives, what are the upfront fees, what are the royalty distributions that people can go and select from. And these selections are actually registered on-chain on Story Protocol, and all of that logic can be automatically executed and enforced. So we've created a one-to-one link between the legal world and the on-chain world, and we think that the legal world will help to the legal world will be streamlined by bringing it on-chain onto Story Protocol. So the ultimate vision, and I'll show you a little glimpse of this today, is that just like DeFi created this permissionless ecosystem that was composable around money, that we can do a similar thing for IP. So you can imagine IP gets registered on some creator tool onto the protocol. People generate licenses permissionlessly off that IP that gets sold on a marketplace like OpenSea. And then someone buys one of those licenses, posts about this new character on social media because they now have the rights to it. That social media post blows up. They get the comic book rights. And now all of the revenue from all of this is tracked because we know how this IP evolved, because it evolved permissionlessly through different platforms and different mediums, and that revenue can be automatically streamed on-chain. So the end goal is for IP to look a little bit like this, not like the individual atoms of static, isolated images, but rather a real web and a real ecosystem where each node can be an IP asset and each connection is an economic or legal relationship that's built in. So I'm going to do a live demo here. Let's see how this goes. I want to walk you through a sort of hypothetical life cycle of an IP by showing you some of the different partners that we've integrated with and how they can sort of plug into each other. So we'll start with Magma. Magma is a Web 2 app that is building essentially Figma for visual artists. So they actually have quite a bit of traction. They have over 2 million artists building on top of them. And we've integrated Story Protocol with Magma to allow these artists to register their IP on our protocol and allow any other app to license that work. So I'm just going to add a little smiley face to this beautiful drawing, and I'm going to register this on Story Protocol. So you can see here that it pops up. It's a completely Web 2 UI, right? There's no complicated wallet addresses. There's no gas fee. All of this is handled by us. And so we can work with existing Web 2 platforms, social media platforms, or with Web 3 native apps. Because I only have one hand, I'm just going to type a quick name, and you can see here that there's licensing options. So if I want more details, I can actually compare these two flavors of the programmable IP license. One is a non-commercial flavor where people can remix but not monetize my work. The other is a commercial license where I actually can set fees and upfront costs as well as recurring revenues if people want to commercialize that work. And so you can see that these are very simple flavors. If you're a developer, you can go into our API and get much, much more granular, but just for simplifying the UI, we've simplified it to non-commercial and commercial. So let's go with non-commercial. I can register this on chain. Now, an interesting feature of Magma, like I said, it's Figma for visual UI. So a big part of the promise of Magma is being multiplayer. And we think that over time, people will collaborate more and more on IPs. So let's actually work on this IP from a different angle. I'm going to log in using another browser as another account. So this is now another account, and I'm viewing, you can see the same ugly happy smiley face I made. That's the same drawing. But now I'm going to add, using Magma's generative AI feature, I'm going to enhance this little fire guy. So I'm going to make it a rainbow fire creature. It's going to take a few seconds to generate. But the idea is, as you can see, we're working together to create an IP. And all of this is being registered on chain. OK, so you can see that now it's rainbow. And I'm going to accept this change. And now I'm going to do the same thing as I did before, which is to register this artwork on Story Protocol. And you can see here, I can give it another name. But the most interesting part is that I can actually split the ownership. So we're talking about revenues, royalties. You can actually split that based on how you see fit. So maybe I'm May now, and I think that the AI is super cool and special, and I deserve 3/4 of the shares, and Jason only gets 5. So I can set those terms and register this IP on Story Protocol. Now, in a moment, I'll show you exactly what this looks like when it's actually registered on chain. We built an Etherscan-like UI, but that takes a while to load. So I'm going to show you something else in the meantime. Another integration we've done with Story Protocol is work with the Lens team to build an open actions that allows any post or publication on Lens to be registered as an IP on Story Protocol. This is Hey, which is a desktop client for Lens, but we've actually also integrated with Orb, which is a mobile-forward client, and it works on basically any Lens client. In this case, I'm just going to create a post, and I'm going to upload a nice image to go along with it. Maybe a cute buffetcorn. And before I post, I'm actually going to do something different. So before I just click this post button, I'm actually going to go here, and you can see there's an open actions button. And one of the options is intellectual property. So this is where Story Protocol comes in. You can now register this cute little buffetcorn as IP. And again, there's nothing complicated here. It's a very simple UI. I just got to name the post and type in the author. And then I can, again, choose between 2 different flavors of licenses. I want to emphasize those are just the 2 licenses we've created for simplicity, but you can really go down the line and make that drop-down menu as granular as you want. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to click Post. And you're going to see this get registered on Lens as a Story Protocol IP. So let's refresh. Usually takes a couple tries. OK, great. So you can see that this new post, this buffetcorn, is now registered. And something different, I want you to just look at this post that I made earlier. There's no copyright logo, but here there is. So you can see this little icon that shows that this post on Lens has been registered as an IP on Story Protocol. You click on it, and you can actually see the specific license and the rights that I chose. So this is how it works on Hey. And now I'm just going to go back to the Magma screen before, where we were collaborating on this IP. I'm going to click Licensing Terms. And then you can actually click View on Story Protocol. OK, this one's still loading. So I'm just going to, I'll show you the initial version, which did not have the AI, which is also still loading. So anyways, I mean, in this case, we can just go forward, and it'll eventually start loading. But the idea that I want to get in people's heads is look at how these different apps are interacting with each other. The interesting thing is you can imagine an IP that maybe that fire creature that are registered on Magma actually gets posted on Hey. And so the real promise of programmable IP is that it's sort of this universal data layer that any app can tap into. And so that fire creature gets registered on Magma. It then gets posted on Hey. It blows up. And then now this is another app called MyShell that we've integrated with, which is an AI-powered sort of conversational agent app. So you can imagine that maybe someone gets really excited about this fire creature, and they want to create a conversational agent around it. They can actually license that permissionlessly into MyShell as an AI model. And one thing we've done is that we've actually allowed these models to be stored on-chain as IPs. So it's not just art or text or videos that can be stored, but actually AI models themselves. And I'll show you this time. I preloaded this, but this is what our dashboard looks like. It's kind of like an Etherscan for Story Protocol. And you can see this model right here. These LLM models with Mistral and OpenVoice are actually registered on Story Protocol as IP assets. So this goes beyond just normal art and text. OK, now let's check on whether this has come up. OK, so this looks like this has loaded. Here I can see the IP that's created. It looks like it didn't actually load the AI-generated parts, but that's OK. But the idea is that you can have this image on Story Protocol, and you can actually view who's the author, what the name, and as well as the licenses associated with that IP on Story Protocol. And the last thing I want to show is this project called Artcast, which we made with Farcaster. So this is a really interesting experiment also involving AI. And what we did here is we plugged in Stability AI on the back end. And anyone can post an image, and then people can permissionlessly remix that image by adding a new prompt. So I picked this one out in particular because it started off as this nice little Shiba, and then people on Farcaster actually added new prompts. You can see the prompts that they used to improve or change this IP over time. So you can see that evolved a lot to where it is today. And this is actually all tracked on Story Protocol in this IP graph. So you can see this one actually, this is a real live example. This one got a lot of different remixes. The blue dot here is the node. That's the original Shiba that was created. And then all of these different yellow dots are different remixes. And I think the green node shows where we are now, which is right here. So you can see that there's maybe like 10 or 20 different remixes that led us to this point. And I really want to showcase this example because it shows you visually what's happening under the hood, which is that every IP registered on Story Protocol essentially becomes a big part of a larger graph. And in this case, even though every single IP is from Artcast, in the future, IPs can come from different apps. So you can imagine one of those nodes is from Magma, and then the next one is from a social media platform, and then the third one is an AI agent on MyShell, and then lastly, it gets shared on Farcaster Frames and leads us to where we are. And each of these nodes are IP assets, and each of the relationships represent economic and legal relationships. So the real vision, as I said before, is to bring this network together. And so we hope the IP graph that you saw just now looks as big as this in the future, and there's an entire decentralized ecosystem of people building on top of programmable IP. So I know this is focused on token-bound accounts, so I just wanted to show some takeaways from how we use this concept. The first is that this allows us to have seamless adoption. Because every NFT can have a token-bound account attached to it, we've basically allowed ourselves as a protocol to adopt every single NFT. So no one actually has to do anything except for click a deploy button, and then their IP gets registered on Story Protocol. So again, the token-bound account acts as a sort of portal to all the functionality of Story Protocol. The second thing is that it's really useful because it allows us to have its own indexing system. So the way that token-bound accounts work is that every NFT comes with a predetermined address. So even if someone hasn't deployed that token-bound account or hasn't registered that IP on the Story Protocol, we know what address is associated with it because of the way that token-bound accounts work. And actually, other people can deploy or register your IP for you, even though they can't control it. So that's an interesting feature. And then lastly, it's basically a portal into all the different modules that we've created. So it's a very flexible sort of technical feature that allows us to register all the NFTs that are out there and all new NFTs as IPs on Story Protocol, and then access as a portal to different apps and different modules. So I'll just close out by saying some ways you can get involved. So number one is we have a lot of our engineering team here, and we have a lot of bounties. So if you're interested in integrating your existing app onto Story Protocol, or if you want to build a brand new app, for example, we would love to work with you for the duration of ETH Denver. You can find us in the Biddle space. We also have a Builder Grants program, and that's going to persist beyond ETH Denver. So if you're interested in building a business on top of us or integrating your existing app, that's something we'd love to do with you. So come and find us that on our Twitter page. And then we also have linked on our Twitter a request for startups. So this is inspired by Y Combinator. But we have a lot of ideas for what people can build, and we've laid out some of those ideas. But of course, feel free to completely ignore them. And then just the last thing on socials, all of our engineers are on Discord, so the best way to interact with us if you have technical questions or want to schedule a time to meet up is through our Discord. And then lastly, our company Twitter has all of these resources linked, or you can DM me at JasonJZhao on Twitter. So hopefully this was helpful in understanding how a Story Protocol works, our vision for the programmable IP layer, and also how we use token-bound accounts. Thank you. Oh yeah, questions would be great. Yeah, so right now we're focused on creative intellectual property, which is mainly in the domain of copyright, and it's a very good question. Eventually we do want to expand to all of technical intellectual property, so that's things like code or trademarks, but right now we're really focused on creative works, and that's what we've tailored the protocol around. All right, any other questions? Yes. Yeah, so the question was, how do we deal with arbitration? This is a really important question and kind of gets at the core of what IP even is. So the way we think about this is we're not really building a new legal system, right? We don't want to usurp the existing legal system. So if you think about the top layer of how the legal system works, that's where we derive our authority from. So this is the traditional, messy, opaque, high-friction pen and paper world of traditional licensing. And then what we've done is create an on-chain IP system. Now, and there's many examples where that might mess up. So someone could like literally right-click save as Mickey Mouse and put it on Story Protocol tomorrow, right? So there's nothing we can do to stop that. So what do we do in that situation? There's multiple layers of escalation, and the first layer that we built is what we call our dispute module. So we're actually building a way for people to flag these violations on chain and to also be able to dispute them and flag them as violating copyright protections or violating a specific term of a license. And we're actually designing a sort of consensus proof of stake inspired mechanism that allows people to stake and slash onto IP that they think is either legitimate or illegitimate, that provides economic incentives for people to secure that IP. So that's the first layer of defense. Now, that might not work. So in the case that that fails, that's why we have worked so hard to build this programmable IP license, because at the end of the day, everything registered on Story Protocol is actually legally binding. So if nothing works out, if the on-chain system doesn't work out, if the dispute module doesn't work out, you can at least escalate to the legal system and deal with the traditional legal system in terms of arbitration. And that's not the outcome that we want. Our whole point is to reduce that friction as much as possible, but we do want to provide that as a last defense. So the way I'd summarize it is, the worst case scenario on Story Protocol is kind of the best case scenario or the only option today, which is the traditional legal system. Way on the back. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. That flow is definitely a demo flow because someone could just say I want 99 or 100% of something, and obviously that's unfair. So the way that we deal with that as a protocol is we see ourselves as neutral infrastructure. So we provide the ability to toggle those settings, but the app gets to decide how they want to govern that. So we've worked with Magma to kind of design a system that will be implemented in production, but different apps can have different mechanisms, and you can imagine a DeFi degen building a really interesting app where like people can set it freely, and the whole incentive is to be like the most recent person to capture all of the royalties or something. So that's an app level decision, not a protocol level decision. But it is a good point that the current flow on the demo is is basically free for all. Yeah. Yes. Oh, you mean the model? Oh yeah. I don't remember. Was someone registering a LLC on chain? Hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I think this is, I'm not familiar with that specific example, but I'll tell you another example, which is like any PFP project is registering IP on chain, right? And I think it's going to run into the exact same problems, which is, okay, so you've registered some license on chain, right? Whether it's copyright in the case of Azuki or Pudgy, or whether it's an LLC in the example that you gave. So what? Like, what do you do with it, right? Like, 'cause at the end of the day, Circle is a centralized company that allows you to translate that one USDC to a US dollar, and that's like guaranteed, right? But if you just register something on chain, you either need a centralized organization or something like Story Protocol to actually make that useful. But we're not a centralized company that does that, so we don't want to be the arbiter of all the disputes, right? So we're not like Circle, but we are providing a new option where there is a so what afterwards. Because right now, if you register IP, if you want to license it, you go back to the traditional legal system. You want to do monetization, you go back to the traditional legal system. So basically, all you've done is register it on the blockchain, but then it's just a static piece of data that isn't dynamic or remixable. And so that's actually a really good question, because that's the whole point of why we need Story Protocol and why we need IP to become programmable. Cool.
Future Primitive